And we are live. Welcome. I'm Laura Jane, and I'm so happy to be here with my friend Jonathan Neale
Howdy.
across town. And like I was saying, I was already wishing we were recording as you were sharing. So what you realized with your current look that's evolved, because I was complimenting you on the latest facial hair and such. And
Yeah. Well, so you got to look the part, right? If I'm going to be a yoga teacher, you got to have the long hair. You don't need all that, of course. That's one of the things we're actually going to talk a little bit about today. But we were joking about that, that it almost happens overnight. You do a few yoga poses, and the next thing you know, like beards, beads, long hair, just everywhere. It's crazy, right?
right. Well, and that's where it's interesting to think. I was actually just realizing this yesterday when I was talking to a friend about what I feel like my story is so far. And maybe
Mhm.
somehow I see the yoga has helped me, I realize, is the union, right? Just with ourselves and just like helping me become myself and become more self-directed and things like that, more and more and more.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's what I love. As you and I've done several of these video conversations, because I always want to invite you when we're talking about such things, and that I really get a sense that you're someone who you teach a lot of yoga to a lot of people, and I really love that. I feel like you're sharing the true essence, in my opinion, of what yoga is, and really trying to impart that to people with the ways you talk about it and share it and teach it.
Yeah,
So
that's the
thank you
intention.
for that.
Is to do our best.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm excited to just hand it over to you really for what you want to share in having a chance to ponder upon this question that I've been bringing up about, is our yoga working? I mean, what do you feel in response to that question?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things I feel about that, and this, honestly, this is something that's just been kind of at the heart, in my mind and my heart for a long time, about yoga, and I think we all kind of get into yoga at first with maybe a little bit of naivety. We're like, oh, this all, everything's all good. And, it's all spiritual and love and, happy. And, I mean, I think that's part of the intention of a good yoga practice is to, to help smooth out our patterns and help, improve our lives in some degree. But, I feel like at a lot of times, uh, I feel like there's a lot of things that we're doing uh, in the yoga realm that aren't really good for us. First of all, they're not really yoga from the essential, like what actual yoga is. They're not actually yoga, and many of the things that we're doing, as I always say, like there's a whole bunch of things that are hashtagged yoga that are not only not good for you, but are actually detrimental to your health
Ah,
and mental. And and so really, what I was looking at is, and to be fair, and I always want to point this out too, that there's plenty of good, real good yoga out there. There's people that are doing the real practice, that are teaching the real practice. And the other side of that is a lot of the people that are teaching these things or following these things that are dangerous or are, not really helping,
mm,
they're doing that still with good intention. They just, in a lot of cases don't know better. I
mm,
mean, they've been taught something by some people that had some good authority, that really were, yoga masters or gurus or people that they just respected. And, it's natural for us to trust those people. Um, but yoga is all about self-inquiry and, as you said, self-determination. And we can take those lessons from those people, but if we really want it, we really have to be pretty brutal in our assessment of these things, and to really look at it like, I know we respect this teacher or this thing, but at the end of the day, what's actually working? What's
mm,
actually helping? And I think that's the question that you're really getting at here. Like, we're all doing it, we're all doing our yoga, but why is it that some people do yoga and their whole life changes? Their personality changes. They
ah,
wear the beads, they get the beard, not that, but that's super. But like, they actually become more peaceful, more mindful, more compassionate, more understanding of themselves and others. And then there's other people that practice all kinds of yoga for decades, and they're still, uh, they're still an asshole, and they're still, they've still got a lot of like they haven't, they're still a wreck, so to speak. They're still a basket case. And so why is that?
yeah,
We have to actually just assess, like, why
yeah,
is it successful in some cases and not in others?
yeah.
And I've basically looked at that, and I have my opinions on that, and obviously that's what I'm here to share. Is
Please.
you know not what's popular, not what's the tradition. And I mean, again, all those things, whatever, we'll take them into account, but what actually practically helps us? What actually, when does our yoga actually working? And by working, I'm assuming that the reason we take on this practice is to make our lives and the lives of those around us better. Yeah. Does that make sense? I mean, is that, would we agree on?
I think, yeah, that's I think you're right that's what we're talking about. Yeah. If it's working. Yeah. Right. And if it's making things better, we mean better for ourselves and the lives of those around us. Yes. I would agree.
Yeah. And so ideally, so I kind of break that down, I mean, to me, it's about just, let's look at the different components of what makes a human being well, right? Like what is actual wellness? Well, in order to be actually well, we have to be well in spirit, in mind, and in body, right? Like if I have a healthy body, but my mind is a wreck, it doesn't really matter. Like I'm still a wreck, and my body's probably going to go downhill too. If I have a lot of spiritual health, I'm really spiritual, but I don't take good care of myself, then I end up in all kinds of health problems, And so we need the three components to be present, and all of these are, of course, really the three. And when we talk about yoga and union, that's really the union that we're looking for, where we realize, like sort of a wellness of these three aspects, all being present at the same time. That's real wellness, right? Like if I lose any one of them, then I can't really say I'm fully well. So that's how I pose to answer, or at least give my opinion on this question of, is our yoga working? So to me, in order for yoga to be working, it has to fulfill that requirement. It has to be nurturing and helpful and advancing in those three categories. And if the yoga that we're doing is sacrificing any one for the other, then it's not real yoga. Because yoga is wholeness, wellness, and union, and it's not worth it. It's a bad gamble, because there are practices that can fulfill all three. So as long as we have those available, why would we choose to take on? A lot of practices, for instance, are very harsh on our physical body. They're not healthy in any regard. And I might end up saying some of the names of some of these things, but I don't want to step on any. I don't want to, I don't want to tell people what's wrong necessarily that directly. I just want people to really assess and think about this.
Yeah.
Like, is the practice, am I sacrificing one of those? Am I doing a practice, for instance, that's so physically demanding that I'm actually sacrificing the health of my body to try to attain some spiritual level? Or, a practice I'm so obsessed with it that my mind is cluttered with whether I'm doing things right or wrong, that even if I do everything, I'm missing that component. We have to have everything present, right? So to me, I broke that down into those three things. Like, what's the spirit, the mind, and the body? And I was looking at like I want to keep a round picture here. So like, what are we doing that's working? And what are some of the things that we're doing that are not working? Right?
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, and I feel like that's really a fresh insight that hasn't come through in the conversations or my thoughts on this fully. And so I love that you're bringing this through, that the mind, body, soul, or spirit aspect, and all three aspects equally important, and that's a great way to evaluate. One of the great ways to evaluate if our yoga is working is if anything that we're doing is compromising any of those other aspects, right?
Absolutely.
And being ready to honor that. And something I just felt like I wanted to bring up, because I remember that something that you and I talked about one time, I think just like hanging out at a yoga party, but because I was talking to you about how I felt like I worked with a lot of people in my yoga teaching and therapy coming to me in physical pain, right? And kind of like, are there people, do we just work with people who are in physical pain? And I remember you said, well, I kind of feel like most of us come to yoga in some sort of pain, right? There is some sort of maybe pain or suffering, whether it's on a mind aspect, right, a body aspect, or a spiritual aspect. There's some sort of pain or suffering that usually will bring us to try or start or experiment with yoga. Do you still feel like that's true?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's what brings anyone to any kind of practice in general. I mean, even basic hygiene. You could say like the reason we take showers is because we feel dirty, right? Like, if you just took a shower, you're probably not going to take another shower right away because you feel clean. So, of course, I mean, like in yoga and, Sanskrit is called dukkha, and they say that, like dukkha, suffering, is in a sense one of the fuels for practice. We realize that like we do have these problems, and that's what brings us to practice, and that's what brings us back too. A lot of times we get off course in our
Right.
practices, and as we then and a lot of times like we just have to kind of like nosedive for a while until we realize like, oh, maybe I should try some yoga again, and then you do it and you're like, oh yeah, there it is. So yeah, I think
Yes.
that, but I think that that with what we're talking about, what I share here today is looking at how any one of those components or any combination of those components can lead a person. Like someone they might be a star athlete and have really great, they take care of their body really well. This is another example. Like maybe they do take care of they're drinking green smoothies and they're taking good care of their body, but their mind is a wreck. They're still going to show up at yoga. Whereas someone
Right.
else might be really peaceful and calm, but they have a bad back and they're trying to
Yeah.
show up and fix it. They might not have any mental, they might be just
Yeah.
living the life of Riley sitting on a beach, but they spent too much time in the hammock, so their back hurts. Or it could be that, a lot of people, of course, it's the spiritual, like maybe they have they've gotten everything they wanted. They got, we hear this story all the time. Guy's multi-millionaire, he has everything he wants, but it's still hollow. So he needs to go and do some yoga because spiritual pain. He's got all the money, he's got all the books, and all the mind is well cultivated, but his spirit is hollow. So pain is what brings us to do it. And ideally, when that's another metric we can use is that, we need less and less yoga as we get more and more in. We need less practice as we get more into the state of yoga. So to me, it's like you might have to practice a little bit more when you're new, but as time goes on, like just a small practice on a regular basis becomes enough. Just as like a person that exercises, when you first start, you might have to push yourself to make those gains and do that stuff. But then after a while, once you're healthy, you can just maintain with a little light exercise here and there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to remind that for anyone who's watching that you and I both, I think, love to remind that we're not just talking about the exercises and the poses of yoga, right? Even though that's such one of the primary tools, and that is one of the places it is important to be using them rightly. But we're talking about the other practices of yoga as well, right? With various forms of meditation and breath and lifestyle and consciousness, right? And psychology.
Well, and that's why we make that breakdown, because the body is where most people, and this is one of the things that's not working is the body is generally, like if you go on Instagram and you search hashtag yoga, 99% are going to be of extreme yoga poses, and there'll maybe be occasionally like someone actually doing a meditation, but even then they're on like a waterfall. It's not about that's still external.
Yeah.
But that's why I say like we have to have the soul, the mind, and the body, because all those things, and realistically, it's not just getting those components. Yoga is the components, not only all being well, but all supporting each other. Like the spirit should support the mind, should support the body, should support the mind, should support the spirit, should body. All these things. In our yoga practice of asana, we learn how to let the breath and the body work together. And if the mind is concentrated on the breath, that brings breath, which we could call spirit and body together. And that's actual yoga, right? Like the body, the breath, and the mind are all present and moving together. And that's how they find union, and that's how they find wellness, because they link up and they support each other and they nurture each other. And that's, it's like the breath nourishes the body nourishes the breath. Like without the body to breathe, move the muscles, the breath couldn't move, and without the breath, of course, the body couldn't work. So, and of course, if the mind wasn't there to coordinate all that, we'd be in big trouble too. So it's just the evident fact of life, and yoga practice is just bringing that into a more mindful and intentional practice. We're taking those kind of disjointed parts and noticing, like, not even bringing them together. It's more about noticing how they already are together. Because your body, mind, and breath are already working. When you're sleeping, they're working together to keep you alive, right? So we're just bringing that, in a sense, we're bringing that subtle life that's always happening within you as you, and then we're bringing it out into the forefront by like really exaggerating it to a level so that we can actually feel how these three components are working together.
Yes. So it is.
So you can't take any of them out of it. even when you're sitting in meditation, the meditation is on the breath and on the posture of the spine and on the body. Even when you're not doing an asana, like body, mind, breath, I feel the way that the breath is moving through my body. My mind stays concentrated on my breath.
Mm.
So regardless of the practice you're doing, that's really, the practice is feeling that in whatever you're doing.
Right, right. Thank you. Yeah, in your moment. So yeah, but please go on. If it sounds
Okay.
like I love what you've got here.
So now that we've done, like a 15-minute intro, let me go ahead. Let's move into the actual thing. So what I wanted to cover again is like, in these three components, what's working and what isn't, right? Like, where are we having success, like globally, not just like me and you, but like, where are we having success in yoga, and where is our yoga working and where isn't?
I love this.
So I'm going to start kind of at the top. I'm going to start with the spiritual aspect, whatever we could call that. One of the first things that's working, and I would say is probably the most important thing. And I like to start with this because there's going to be plenty of negative stuff, because we need to look at that and we need to fix that. But the key thing here is that it's getting people interested. People that otherwise might just be, watching their TV and looking at their screens and going about their normal life, like, at least they're getting at the minimum, some tip of the iceberg interest in introspection in yoga and in spiritual practice, right? Mm. Even if like for a lot of us, it started pretty shallow. I'll be honest, I started doing yoga because I thought I just, like, it felt challenging to me. I tried it. It was really difficult. And like, I had to be good at it. I had to be good at the poses. But, that introduction over time, and since I stuck with it because I was getting good at it, that kind of went in the background and I was able to slip deeper in. So I think we need to recognize that just getting people in the door, even if they're coming in on a superficial level, it's starting the path. And that's a whole lot better than not starting. Right? So major thing that's working is that as long as people are thinking about and trying some kind of yoga, even if it's not great yoga, there's there's plenty of opportunity that'll lead into good things. They're taking the first step. And the first step in anything is almost always shaky, but it's a necessary step to get moving. The other side of that, I would say something that's wrong is that, a lot of people are getting into it with that wrong intention. I'm first to admit again that, like, maybe my intention in getting into it was kind of egocentric, but it's, again, that'll be at that beginning level. But if it's your third, fourth, fifth year of practicing yoga and your intention is still to, like, be better at bending your back or something like that, then we really need to stop and be like, what is this? What are we learning? Like, are we really learning anything of value? We're not even dabbling in the spiritual aspect of it, and we're just doing this physical aspect. And again, if that's not there, the process doesn't work. And that's why you have people that have been doing yoga for 10 years that can put their feet behind their head, but they can't, balance their life out in any regard. They're still a mess, right? Because the wrong intention. And to me, that's a failing, obviously not of the student, but of us as teachers, that we've instilled that, I've heard many teachers say things like, well, like only a month ago, all my students were doing chaturangas on their knees, and now they all have their knees up while they're doing it. Well, I'm doing great. And I'm like, are they any more connected to themselves? Do they have any more self-knowledge? Are they breathing any easier? Do they feel any better? Or are they just doing, because that's exercise. And I'm a trainer too, a personal trainer. That's a great accomplishment in the field of fitness, but it's not advancing in yoga. So, we as teachers need to start taking it seriously and remember that advancement in yoga is when your spirit, mind, body, and spirit start having more connection, and you actually start getting more well in all those fields.
Right.
Not how far you can bend your back, because someday you're going to be 90 and you won't be able to do any of that anyway. So if that's all you practiced, you wasted your time, because that's going to deteriorate. But it's the wellness and the union and the presence that we build that is valuable for the rest of our life, right?
Yes.
And now.
Yeah, and what we're looking to practice in the moment, right, is that the presence. It's more about the presence than the pose.
Absolutely. Right? And we use the poses and these things as tools, but it's like any tool. Like, don't get fascinated with the drill. Focus on the job you're trying to do with the drill, right? If I'm looking at the drill while I'm trying to put a hole in the wall, I need to be looking at the wall. And in your yoga, we need to be looking at, like, what are we actually, like, is building a fancier tool the purpose, or is getting the job done the purpose? And so that's why I
Yeah.
say that, like
Yes.
bad intention. We're setting the
Uh-huh.
wrong intention.
Yeah.
And in our students, when we tell them, when we try to encourage them to advance poses instead of advancing awareness, they should be in the, if you were in the same chaturanga that you were in a month ago, but you had more awareness of your shoulder structure and your neck and how you were moving, that is a million times better and more useful than being able to do it with your knees up, for instance.
Right. Yeah.
You know, that needs to be the focus, and we need to get that out there. That, you know, this is a presence practice.
Yes. And it's not just about pushing yourself, but also listening to yourself and resting, and just all, like you said, the awareness that we're building and the use of our attention,
Absolutely.
versus what it just looks like we're doing.
Yeah. But I mean, and you know, that we're going to get into more of that, like the pushing yourself, when I get down to the body aspect. I have plenty to say about that. I mean, I'm saving the body for last because it's going to be it's going to be a little harsh on a lot of things.
Yeah, that
we need to be, because there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that people are doing that just aren't. They're just plain dangerous.
That's how I feel too. I really do.
And so, but I don't want to get ahead of myself, because I got a lot more to spout off at the mouth about here. But so I want to go back again. Like what's another thing that's working spiritually is that, you know, and we're going to talk about this as well, but you know, people are actually starting to like reconnect to their breath, even on like a small, even if it's just that like 5-6 times in a class where the yoga teacher says, remember to breathe, and you remember to breathe. Again, that's that first step. Like having a connection to your breath, that is connection to spirit. Like respiration is the root word of respiration is spirit, right? You're respiring, you're inspired. Like breath is the spiritual aspect in the manifest reality, right? So, you know, the fact that people are even making some connection to that, because in our day-to-day life, you go most of your life without ever even really knowing that you're breathing or noticing. Yeah. So I think that's really important.
Oh, I love that you bring that up. Yes, one of the ways it is working is it's connecting more people with their breath, even if it's in the simplest of ways. But that's
baby steps are still steps,
right? And it's huge.
And you know, I mean, again, you know, like crawling is better than not moving at all, right? And you know, so even if people are just getting a little bit more, that'll build. As long as they practice more, they'll get more and more. And you know, so that brings me to the side of like what's not working there is it's a little bit scary and a little bit embarrassing how many yoga classes I've been to that some of them literally never even talk about breathing, never even mention it. And then other ones is kind of like, yeah, make sure you're breathing. And it's just, it's almost always some background aspect, because again, the key is get my cool pose. And you know, and really, honestly, if you're trying to make some really badass pose, the breath gets in the way, because in order to hold some of that stuff, you can't really be breathing. So the breath is like pushed way aside for the sacrifice for the pose, which is literally the opposite of what should be happening.
Yeah, I agree.
The pose should serve, again, those components should serve each other. And if I'm sacrificing anyone for the others, bad idea. Going to get hurt for sure, or at the very least, it's not going to do anything for you. You know, so it's good that people are connecting to their breath at all. I think as yoga teachers, it's our calling to make sure that that is the center of practice. You know, even Krishnamacharya, like the grandfather of yoga, he said that, you know, his quote is that yoga is pranayama. Pranayama being breath, awareness and control of the breath. And he said that that is yoga. Yeah. No uncertain terms. That's what he said. He said that the breath control is yoga. And so, I mean, if the yoga class that we're doing has no focus whatsoever on the breath, it is exercise. Yeah. And again, I'm a big fan of exercise. Yeah. I'll take you out in the park. We'll do push-ups. We'll do all kinds. We'll swing kettlebells. It'll be great. You'll get fit. You'll be buff. We'll advance your body in all kinds of ways. It's not yoga. You know?
Yes, I agree. Right. The use of breath is part of what can make something yoga, right? It always involves the breath.
There's an enormous potency in the breath to bring clarity to the spirit and to the mind. And it's also, there's an enormous potency to your physical health.
Yeah,
right. I'm not going to get into the immense amount of science behind it, but like the things that happen in your body when you start actually taking full breaths, like the balancing of your pH levels throughout your body, the calming of the nervous system, so many things happen that it's like, if all you did was sit here and did breathing, that would probably be 100 times healthier than most people's yoga practice.
Oh my
You know,
gosh. Woo, that's a good
and it
one.
doesn't, but the problem is it doesn't sell. You know, if
Uh-huh.
I post a video of me breathing on Instagram, I'm not going to get a lot of followers. But if I post some photo of me doing a back bend in Bali, then like, yeah, everyone's going to tap on that one,
Yeah.
which is fair. I mean, we're visual creatures, but you know, that's part of the thing, is that yoga is supposed to be about getting out of that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, not being that.
Mm,
You see
mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like, so like yoga is supposed to be in a sense, like a cure for a lot of the nonsense we pick up in culture, in society, right? But if we're bringing the nonsense from culture and society into yoga, then instead of yoga helping us, we're now, you know, it's like we're hurting yoga instead of just letting it help us.
Ah,
And that
yes.
brings us to kind of our next point, that, you know, one of the main problems, and this is a spiritual problem as well, is that we've taken yoga and we've turned it into another, in the endless stream of them, another linear struggle towards some future goal. Now I'm beating myself with poses and with practices. I'm sitting here doing all this stuff to myself so that someday I will be good enough. I'll
Oh,
be enlightened or something, you know?
this is
And it's
dangerous.
the same old thing. It's just, all we've done is we've taken, if I make enough money and get enough stuff, then I'll be happy. And then that didn't work. So now we're like, if I get spiritual enough, then I'll be happy. And so it's the same game. It's the
Mm.
ego's game. It's like, I'm not there yet. It's the carrot on a stick. You'll never get there, right? There is always further away, because the truth is that there is here. And if you're trying, the problem is, if your whole practice is about trying there, you're never ever going to be present here.
Ah,
Because the whole time you're going to be thinking about, man, I wish I could. I'm trying to get a little bit further, instead of just being here and just being here. So
ah,
again, we take yoga and we just, you know, we put our spin on it, and it just makes it not yoga. It's also,
I-
again, when
ah,
we get to the body, we'll talk about how that's dangerous as well, because you know
ah.
it leads to all kinds of forcing and jamming and competitiveness and other stuff. That again, is, we come back to the first point, is just an exhibition of that wrong intention. Our teachers didn't teach us the right intention of yoga.
Mhm. Right. If it's
And
about that next pose. Yes, but then we
unfortunately,
are sacrificing mind and spiritual aspects when we make it about the future and some goal and some aspiration, right? That really takes us out of the moment, like you're saying. I'm so glad you're bringing this up.
yeah. Well, you know, I mean, it's simple logic, really. At the end of the day, I mean, when my mind is focused on a future thing, and let's be clear, it's not always bad. Like, you want to think about, like, you know, planning and all those things are great skills, but when my mind is focused on the future, it literally can't be here, present,
Yeah.
right? Because you can only be in one place at one time. So if the whole time I'm practicing, my mind is on a future pose or goal, then I could spend 20 hours a day doing yoga and never do an ounce of yoga,
Yeah.
because yoga is presence. Whereas I could spend 5 minutes sitting like this and just focusing on my breath, softly, gently feeling it, and I'd be out the door and I'd feel a million times better. So,
Uh, ah,
you know, but another thing that is working, and another thing that I want to get back to, like, some positive aspects spiritually, is that, you know, even with some of the broken and some of these disjointed practices we have, and you know, maybe we don't always have the right, there's still a lot of emotional healing that takes place on the yoga mat and in the studio. And
mhm.
I've seen a lot of that. I've experienced a lot of that. And it's still happening, you know, and I bring up the bad things because we need to look at them and we need to address them. But, you know, I still am I'm still an optimist. And I still think that, like, we're still at early stages of this transformation globally, you know, and and it always looks rocky at the start, but there's people having real changes, people getting real introspection and getting real release in some of these classes and some of these practices. And we want to honor, and we want to make sure that we respect that it is working.
Ah,
We just have these things that we need to, it's like, I'm a pretty healthy guy, but I know there's a whole list of things I could be doing to be healthy,
mhm.
right? Like, our yoga's working, but if we're not careful and if we don't start to add in other things, I could really might not always be doing this, might not continue on that upward good trend.
Mm.
So, we ought to be mindful in that. Anyway, y'all will carry on if you're ready to go.
Yeah, do.
I'll try to keep this moving relatively quick. I know we kind of hit a half hour already, but
don't feel like you need to be rushed. Just share.
So the mind aspect, we kind of covered the spiritual aspect of it, and the mind aspect is kind of very similar in a lot of ways. The difference between mind and spirit, I feel, gets kind of blurred in a lot of senses. But one of the big things that I find very just interesting is how many people I know that are even like really long-term yoga teachers that have never even glanced through like the Bhagavad Gita or never have researched into like Upanishad. They've never done what they call the Gyan Yoga, like actual study of scripture, an actual study of like what is it that is behind this practice. Like, yes, we have asanas and breath, but what is like the philosophical basis for all this? And this is really evident because, again, this is, to me, has been an integral factor in helping my yoga to actually work for me. Is that having context of like what I'm doing this for and what it is that I'm actually trying to do. And that context is found in yoga philosophy and in Vedic philosophy. And if we don't have that, I look at it as like, it's like reading a sentence in the book and ignoring the paragraphs and all the writing around it. You might get something out of it, and you might slowly be able to extrapolate all that out of it. Some people practice yoga and they just get the mystical revelation, but having that backing of knowing the philosophy and knowing like what is yoga. Most people, if you ask them, like, yoga is actually the name of the state of union. We call it the practice yoga because it's just practical to do that. But yoga, so like you ask most yoga teachers even like, what is that state like? And they'll probably scramble around through some new age things, or they'll say, I don't know, or like everyone's striving for this enlightened state, but no one really knows what it is. And part of that is because no one bothered to read. Like for instance, like the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita is the principal text of yoga. And how many yoga teachers, that actually sat down and read cover to cover the Bhagavad Gita? How many that actually have and don't just say that they have because they read the Cliff Notes? So, and it's not the student's fault. Like, our job is to impart that to us. I don't expect my students to go home and read the Gita. My job is to bring that in and then get that, put that into my practice, and then feel it, and then share that in a way that's, but it comes through if we have it inside. Right? Like if I practice the philosophy and if I put it into practice, which is the other aspect, like not just having philosophy, but putting it into your yoga practice and into your day-to-day life. Like, how many yoga people do you know that are actually every day like striving to know themselves and to be more even-minded? How many yoga teachers that fly up and down off the handle all the time? But that's what yoga is. You read the Gita, that's the whole Gita is basically Krishna telling Arjuna, like, hey, I know you're going into this battle and I know everything's great. I know you have all these things, but like, do your breath, do your yoga, and live your life, and to actually put it into, to have that backing of the philosophy and put it into practice.
Yes.
I think that's something that, like, again, a lot of people are getting that right. I'm not going to say they aren't, but there's a lot of gaps in that. There's a lot of people that are just doing body stuff. Maybe they're even doing the body and the spirit. There's some people that like are all super spiritual and they're really, really flexy and they're really, really, they got a nice 6-pack, but they don't read the book, and again, this is where we get like, none of these things should stand alone. They all serve each other. Having that philosophical basis helps me to understand things that are happening spiritually. It helps me to have an idea of what I'm actually doing in my physical practice. In the physical practice, I can notice in embodying that philosophy as my spirit, my breath present. All these things should support each other.
Yes. And even some of the mental approach and the psychology of yoga, right, that we can be bringing in comes through the more ancient teachings and such.
A lot of stuff that we find. There's tons of stuff right out of these books that, if you posed it in a less, mystical way to like a competent psychologist, they'd be like, yeah, that's how you, that's how you would break down old patterns and reestablish new patterns. That's really a lot of what yoga is about as well. Is like looking at like Where do I have unhealthy patterns, perhaps? Like in my body, am I doing this? In my mind, am I constantly obsessing over something? In my spirit, do I feel depressed? Where am I having unhealthy patterns, and how can I extract those and implant them? How can I repattern?
Yes,
and
right.
If you don't know that's what you're doing, then your yoga will not work. Because if I am shooting an arrow and I don't have a target, I cannot hit a target.
Yeah.
Because if someone's like, shoot that, and there's like a million things out in front of me, I'm like, which that? Right? So we got to know that we got to have the backings of spirit and mind, because that's what's going to lead us to actually doing like a healthy and effective physical practice. Because if the only thing I have to go off in the physical practice is looking at Instagram, I'm going to break my back. Right?
Yeah.
And like, I'm going to injure myself because I'm trying to do these things and I don't understand the context, like the philosophical and spiritual context.
Yes.
And so that's really, really important that we get that out there more. And again, it is out, all these things, it is out there. Many people are doing it. Many people are having success here. It is spreading. It is growing. We just, we need to be mindful of it, and we need to continue to let that happen, and continue to remember that that's part of, especially us yoga teachers, that's what we should be doing. We need to be integrating these things. We need to be really giving people the full picture and not just a piece. Move on. Do you have anything you want to ask? Anything? Or are you good? We're going to move on to the body next.
Sure. Yeah. I'm ready for you to move there. Yeah, and I will. I'll get in what I want to say. So thank you for making sure.
I tend to go on, so I could go on for hours. So I'm going to try to.
Well, I'm enjoying just giving you the space to share since you really came with some clear ideas on what you wanted to say. So
I even wrote the notes and everything.
It's great. I know. I love it. It's awesome.
Well, I wanted to make sure that I could not miss anything and I could get across.
Because it's important to you, and you have some
good.
It's
important to me, and I think it's important, because when we move into the body, this is a good time to talk about this. As a yoga teacher, you literally have rooms full of people that are trusting you.
Yeah.
To take good care of them. And I'll just say that there's a lot of yoga teachers out there that instead of looking at their students as someone to care for, someone to love, someone to nurture in their path, look at them as an art project, right? Like I don't want to step on any toe. I don't really care. But anyway, when people get like really creative with their flows, and they're doing all these like, oh, now we're going to do this and that because it's cool and it's creative, that you're using those students as an art project. It's not about their health anymore. It's not about what's good for them. It's about how cool of a dance routine you can make for them. And again, dance routines are fine as long as you're not selling them as self-care yoga. If you're trying to open a dance studio and be like, I'm going to teach you dance. Might break your toes, might be bad, but like you wanted the dance. But if you're telling people like, hey, I'm going to fix your back in yoga, and then you're using them to make a really cool creative flow that you're going to post on your, or that just makes you feel good, like that is not okay.
Yeah.
We can't. The practice should be designed so that you actually help the student find body and spirit. It's about them, right? It's not about you looking cool and feeling like an artist. Like go home and paint, go make a sculpture. Many other ways you can exhibit your creativity without using unsuspecting people that trust you as your art piece, right? So just saying that, it's the thing that leads to is that and even people that aren't doing that, there's no intention. Practices that people are teaching in a lot of regards are based off of traditions. Some guy said this is good, so here we go, and largely just based off of whimsy and intuition. Instead of being based off of like, I actually sat around and read and studied human anatomy and studied human movement, and I'm going to make this practice, even if it's not sexy and it doesn't look cool. That's not my job. My job is to help people put themselves back together, body, mind, and spirit. Heal them. Not to heal them magic, but to like teach them how to heal and how to take care of themselves. And that usually leads to a practice that doesn't look as cool on Insta.
Totally.
But looks really cool when your students stop coming in with broken this and that.
Yes.
So,
ooh, well said.
you know, and I mean, like, I don't, you know, I know lots of people that I know people that I love that actually teach in ways like this, and it's not a judgment of them because these people got this stuff, right? Like, this came down from on high from the people they love and respected, gurus and teachers that are like practical gods and idols in the yoga scene.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't blame them for not knowing this, but I just encourage people to really like take that and do your yoga, like do introspection. Look, what is my actual intention? What am I actually like showing up to take care of these people, or am I showing up to be cool and to have people like me? Because there's people that don't like my class because it's very simple and very practical and very straightforward, and it's challenging because we're doing things that are actually effective. But it's we don't put our feet behind our head, we don't spin our spine all the way around because those things don't help you, they hurt you. So, but there's people that don't like it, but you just have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
The fact that like your job is not to be liked, your job is to help. And you know, it's a big step to make things challenging because again, you won't get popularity out of it. But you get the satisfaction knowing that you helped instead of hurt.
Right. Yeah. Because a lot of that current work out there, as far as the poses, is dangerous and really way too challenging, I think, for most modern bodies, and just a lot of risk for injury and not actual experience of yoga. Right. So I agree.
No, I mean, I'll give a few examples of things that are extremely commonplace.
Yeah.
That are not just ineffective, but they're actually damaging to your body.
Yeah. Right.
Does anyone that's ever been to my class or that's ever talked to me for more than 5 minutes about yoga already knows this? But just a common example would be this one. And almost every back bend, especially happens when people are doing cobra. You will see this action. This is extremely bad for your body, especially while you're in that position where you're laying on your belly. It is terrible for you. Now, I mean, there are ways that you can make some of these movements and be well supported and actually do it. Professional gymnasts, some of these people can do it because they have very, very, very good fine muscle control and they can make, but that is like 0.0000001% of the population. It ain't you, it ain't me, right? So for the average person, I'll just show so Guru told me, he wrote in his book that when you do high cobra, you do this. And I only went to here, and my teacher said, push it, so I did this. Now, notice what happens in this position. My neck is, first of all, being crushed. The vertebrae of the cervical spine are literally doing this under pressure on the back of the neck, right? The other thing that happens is I throw my head back. The sternum and the rib cage drop down, which is causing a rounding where we actually want to be creating the arch in the first place. So we're further disabling the muscles that we're actually trying to get with the cobra. This dropping, the ribs dropping down, disables the transverse abdominis of the abdominals. And therefore, your spine is now even in worse condition than it was before. And it makes the head of the humerus roll forward. Now, this is bad news if you're just sitting here like I am. Like, I don't even like to do that. It is very bad news if you are under a lot of pressure and a fast vinyasa, because this is, you know, I'll just say this is like Ashtanga yoga. We're going to jump around. Like, there's no way, even that 0.01% of people are able to maintain that structure at the throat and at the transverse while they're doing these things. And that is just the most common pet peeve that I have, because it's, if we bothered, the reason it bugs me is because if we bothered to even stop, like, just do it. Like, if you as a yoga teacher bothered to go home, try this, try this, try this, you would know. You don't need a book to tell you. You don't need a guru to tell you. You'd feel, ouch.
Yeah.
Yay. Ouch. Yay. Right? And that's, so this again gets back to like, our yoga is actually listening to your body instead of what so much of it is now, which is, what I always say is like, you're supposed to be being a good friend to your body. Now, a good friend, like, you're a good friend. If you said like, hey, I don't like it when you put your wet cup on my coffee table, right? Now, if I'm like, hey, you know what? If you're like, hey, I'd rather you use a coaster, please. Now, if I was just like, hey, you know what, screw you, I'm gonna wipe my cup all over your table, like that wouldn't be being a very good friend, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if I put that cup there and you were like, hey, I'd rather you didn't set that there, or at least use a coaster, and I was like, oh, sorry, let me put it, of course, dummy me, but thank you, and I put it on the coat, I'd be being a good friend, right? So if I'm in my practice, I'm going to become full circle back around to the intention of like linear progression, and my goal is to progress. I stop being a good friend to myself and I start being a bad boss. Now I'm overworking myself. I'm doing the same thing that probably brought me, my boss is an asshole, my work sucks, I had to go to yoga, and now I'm just bringing my boss with me. I put him in my head, and now he's judging me while I'm doing my poses. It's not good enough, and I'm not, and I miss the whole thing, and then we get into this pushing it. We lose our presence, and then we do things that are dangerous and are just frankly damaging because we're not listening. We're listening to the guru in our head, we're listening to that advancing mind in our head, and we're not listening to our body. I'm more concerned with, my whatever than I am with the fact that my body's aching. My body's saying, hey, could you please put the cup on a coaster? And I'm just being like, shut up, fatty. I gotta bend my back into enlightenment here.
Yeah, right.
And so it's just very, again, we come back to like, these things have to be together. Because the bad mindset, the bad spiritual set, the bad mindset leads to a bad physical practice. And the bad physical practice leads us to more pain, more trauma, more I'm not there yet, which screws up our spirit, our mind. And so it's the downward spiral or the upward one. And so, I'll say this in conclusion. We need to be making sure that we're taking care of our spirit, taking care of our mind, and we're taking care of our body. So if we want our yoga to actually work, we have to be mindful. We have to be a good friend to ourselves. We have to actually listen to what our body is saying, and then be willing to go, shocking, be willing to go to an easier or simpler pose so that we don't leave hurting ourselves. We have to be humble, which is, very hard for yoga teachers to be humble. Very difficult because everyone respects you and loves you, but we have to take that humility side. And at the end of the day, we just have to listen. We have to be really practical. Like, I don't care if Guru said it. I don't care if God came out of the heavens and said it. I don't care if it's written in all the ancient texts that I also like. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I
if
love
you've
that.
done if you've done yoga for a year and your body, mind, and soul don't feel better, you need to find another yoga teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're helping me see that a big part of the practices is to stay practical. Ironically,
that's why it's called practice. You could also save yourself a bunch of time that way, because people spend hours doing yoga, and it's like if you just did it well and intentional, you could spend 10 minutes a day just doing a few poses, a few breaths, and you'd be better off than because you got to be there. It's about you being there. And as you said at the beginning, it's the famous quote, it's not about a pose. It's about the person. It's about presence. You should choose. I put it this way about poses. Poses are like a big box of tools. And if you're going to get a job done, you need to pick the right tool. If I go grab a hammer and it's a screw in the wall, I'm gonna mess up that wall, right? So, and if I go grab a wrench, then I don't even know what I'm going to do, right? So it's not about trying to get to the next pose. It's about selecting the right pose. If a lower cobra helps my spine to decompress a little more, my middle back to get a little stronger, my lumbar spine to decompress, if it does all those things and I'm in the low cobra instead of the high one, and I go in the high one and my lumbar compresses, I would much rather you do the other one.
Right. And like you said, like what's happening for us mentally and the spiritual experience, which so includes the breath, are such a part of that pose, right? That makes it yoga, if that's where we're practicing.
If you can't breathe Ujjayi breath, not just like gasping, if you can't breathe like a smooth, even Ujjayi breath, that's another reason that the breath is so important, because that informs you that you've pushed yourself too far. Before your body starts to hurt, the first sign is restricted breathing. If I can't breathe, if I can't soften, is another indicator. If I have to squeeze my face to hold a pose,
right.
this is again where like reading the ancient philosophy would, and if you had that backing, it would inform you that that's not proper yoga.
Yes.
Because proper yoga is where we're centered and we're calm. We're in distress. We're in challenge. We're in difficulty, but we're still breathing and able to be somewhat peaceful there.
Yes, right.
And so if you're straining in the pose, it's like, again, it's not yoga. We're
Yeah,
not
really
actually arriving at yoga.
I'm thinking it's like more of the opposite of yoga, which is if yoga means union or to connect, it's more of a disconnect, right? For us, whether it's mentally, physically, spiritually, there's more of disconnection happening when we're going about things that way, our practice that way, right? And with those kind of intentions,
literally what it does.
Lack of intention.
Well, and that's our whole problem, is that that's what happens all day. Like, you know, we sit in front of a computer while we work, and I get disconnected from my body and my breath, my mind wander, you know. So if I just do that again on my mat, then I mean, I should have just stayed at work. At least I would have gotten paid for traumatizing myself, right? You know, but again, like the yoga is the cure. You know, it's the thing that is supposed to. It shouldn't be the same. It shouldn't be the same linear struggle that we're already doing, because we already have that, and that's the problem. That's why our mind and our soul and our body are jacked up. And if we don't do a practice that actually opposes that, you know, again, it's repatterning. Like if I'm swung way over this way, like work's not bad. We want to work, but if I'm being like total stress all the time, I need to swing that pendulum back. I need to have time on my mat to get back to just like not trying to get anywhere, just being simply present. And you know, but if we turn it into another struggle, then we basically just picked up a second job that we don't get paid for.
That's so well said. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is one of the deep potential problems of it, isn't it? That we can turn into another personal development quest that is never going to be give us that final fulfillment, right? This never-ending look to the future that
it's the carrot on the stick,
takes us out of the union and the moment and the now. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and you know, and it's unfortunate, but at the same time, like I said at the beginning, you know, like I try to reiterate through this that, like, you know, in order, you know, this is the same thing in yoga too. You know, in order to actually grow, we have to actually be willing to look at the things in you know, past not a negative judgment. We have to be willing to pass some judgment of like, is this healthy or not?
Right.
You know, and so I could point and there's tons of people, millions of people that are having really positive effects from practicing various practices of yoga, you know, but if we really want to enhance and accelerate and enlarge that, we need to look at the areas where it's not. You know, I mean, it's very easy to, you know, we see it all the time. People, you know, we don't want to criticize ourselves. It's always some external thing. But that's again, real yoga is self-study, svadhyaya, self. It's you got to be ruthless in it. You got to be willing to look and be like, you know, as a practitioner or as a student, not only where is my humorous and where is my thing in this down dog, but where is my intention? What am I actually trying to do right now? Am I in this pose to be more mindful, to feel my breath, or am I in this pose to six-pack abs or something, you know, or to look cool on my gram? You know, like we gotta be really, really brutally honest with ourselves about that stuff. As individuals and as a collective, as you know, especially as teachers of yoga, we have to be willing to look and be like, you know, what is the representation? What is the message we're putting out there? And I think it's time for us to return to some actual yoga. I think it's time for us to remember that all three of these aspects need to be respected. And I think it's really high time that we remember, you know, that yoga is not about getting anywhere. You literally already are there. And the attempt to get there is the denial of being there. Like you are already perfect union of body, mind, and breath. Already. When you sleep, your body and your mind and your breath work together. That's why you get to wake up in the morning. So trying to get to that state is the denial of that state. And that's what sets us off on the endless quest to get to where we already are. Right? it's like, I'll say, it's like what we've talked about before. If I have glasses on my head, I search my whole house. When I'm finally exhausted of searching, I go like, and I find out that I had my glasses the whole time. And so it's like, just skip the linear struggle. The point is it's kind of an interesting thing. It's like you said, it's not a wellness practice. It's not like some practice of like, self-improvement. The interesting thing is that it's not, but it is.
Yeah, right.
Because the paradox is that if you're practicing with the intention of getting to wellness or getting somewhere, then it won't take you there. But if you're practicing with the intention of being present, then it actually will take you there.
Yeah.
So, it's like, because you're already there. So all you have to do is get present.
Ooh.
Right? So that's what I want. Dial back the asana a bit. Not that we don't do it, but like, take the poses down a notch. Be more present. Like, not how far can I go into a pose, but how deep can I go within the experience of the pose.
Yes.
And if we do that, and if we teach presence as a practice, then our yoga will work. It's already working, but it'll work far better and far more wide scale.
Ooh.
And that's what I have to say about that.
Woo!
I have a lot more I could probably run on about specificity.
Oh, that
but,
was so great.
The general idea.
Oh, I love it, Jonathan. That I'm so thankful that you took time to get clear on what you wanted to say here, because it's been so important and helpful, and things that have not come up so far and are just key and vital. And I feel like, the common thread through it all has been your talk of our intentions and how important that is in whatever we're calling our practice.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the deciding factor is, the invisible factor is the deciding factor. When we look around and we say, like, why is this person succeeding, so to speak, quote unquote, in yoga, and this person isn't? It's the reason you can't nail it down is because it's something that's happening in here while the person's doing the movements and the poses. And you can't touch that. You can't feel it. It doesn't post on Instagram. That's why it's a self-practice, because only you know what's going on in there. And that's, and far more than, I talk a lot about body, but like monitoring your intention throughout practice, like, you really want to have the most eye-opening and emotionally challenging and clearing and just like inwardly savage practice ever. Make your whole practice about watching your intention. About watching your mind and its movements and why you're doing the things that you're doing. It's, for most people, it's, they'd rather do a full wheel back bend. That's why they do that. That's less scary to them.
Yeah, right.
Possible breaking their back is less scary to them than actually looking and seeing, like, oh man, I got a bunch of shit in there.
Yeah.
And like, not a judgment, but like, if your barn's full of shit, get a shovel. Right. And but if we don't know that it is, we're just like, man, why is that smell always hanging around my farm? And so we need to do that. Like, if we don't want that smell of depression and anxiety and all this other stuff and physical ailment, we need to monitor our attention. We need to actually get the shovel and get the shit out of there. So
such good analogies, man.
Yeah. Well, I didn't grow up on a farm, but I drove by one once. That wasn't enough to get the picture.
So awesome. And will you mention, because I'm sure people watching this who don't know you or want to know how to find you, how do they come do classes with you right now? What are some
so I have several things that I'm doing. I'm teaching at 2 yoga studios. One of them is called Free Spirit Yoga. It's located in Long Beach, but obviously everything's being done by Zoom nowadays. Yeah. So if you're in we've had people from Germany dial in, we've had people from Oklahoma dial in, all kinds.
Yeah.
So we do that. I'm teaching there Tuesday, Thursday, Friday mornings, 8:30. And Friday afternoon at 5:30. I'm also teaching at a studio in Cyprus called Stella Luna Yoga. That's Monday and Thursday nights at 6:30. I also obviously offer a lot of one-on-one. And there's other things we didn't get to talk about here about like what's not working for the body. One of the key things is that there's other practices. Stretching has its place, but there's things that we need to do to our body specifically, especially in our yoga practice, with releasing certain tissues and retensioning other ones. So that's something I really like to share one-on-one. It's a lot easier to do that. So I do online. We could do outside meetings. I have some clients that are comfortable meeting outside one-on-one. Other people, if you're not cool with that, or if you're far away, we could do it via video call. But that's something I'm really trying to bring in too, is, we have our yoga practice, but we have these other things that if we implement them can be a yoga practice of their own, and also are just really, really vital. If we don't have those components, we could really, really end up, like myofascial release and specific corrective exercises that just really empower our body, mind, breath practices, and really, especially just take good care of that body.
Yeah, right.
So I'd love to do that. I also, of course, do personal training. Like if you just want to like swing some kettlebells, lift some weights, I can do that in person in the park. Been doing that. It's been beautiful lately. It's been really great out there. And, we could do that too. So, feel free to find me on my Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Name's Jonathan Neale. That's it.
All
That's
right.
basically it, yeah.
So great. Wow. Well, I'm so thankful. I knew it would be an awesome drop-in with you, and I'm thankful that this is going to be out there now for influencing others. So, anything else you want to say as we call it to a close?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone that did watch this, especially if you're a yoga teacher, if you feel at all, this is my last thing. If anything, new like this, like maybe this practice I've been teaching isn't all that great. Just it's hard to change. It's hard to make that decision that maybe something that I've been faced with this myself, and that's why I share it, that maybe something that I've been teaching for a long time isn't that good. And it's really, really hard to admit that, because we've gotten, but if you can do that, if you can be willing to change with new information, and you're willing to look for that new information, it is out there. And you can find a practice that will nurture your students, that will take care of them, will still do all the cool stuff they want. But we got to get intentional about that. So, please be willing to look at yourself, cast aside what doesn't work, put in what does work, because that's what yoga is in the first place.
So true. Thank you. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because we did wind up having some good conversation about what's happening in the teaching world. So I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Also,
there's a lot more to be said about
support the teachers who might be a little bit like, oh no.
Yeah, well, it is hard. It's scary,
right? Yeah.
Especially like I said, when you've been taught this stuff by well-meaning, well-respected people that you probably love. And again, this is the problem, is that we take it as a personal judgment on them, on ourselves, as like, oh, you're saying that I'm bad. We gotta get rid of that. It's not a moral high ground. It is pure practicality. These people come to me and they trust me. Take care of them. And I need to be 100% honest and with myself, and just do what's going to help them.
Yeah, right.
Because that's the obligation that we have, and some of that's going to require us to put aside things that we love. But nothing's better than helping people. Nothing's more important than helping your students. So we should be willing to do that.
Yeah, yeah. Being practical and intentional. Those are really key ideas here.
That'll take you a long way, I found. If you just pay attention to what actually practically works, and then you apply it, you pay attention to it, you make sure that it's actually working, and then you just implement. It's amazing how well that works.
Yeah, right. Keys to life. Wow.
Simple scientific process. Just watch, observe what's working, what's not. Switch out the good, switch out the bad, put in the good. Over time, you build something nice.
Yep. It's like philosophy for life. So thank you so much, Jonathan. I love it. And I've totally appreciated your time here. So
thank you for having me, and for providing this platform. It's I like to talk about these kind of things, and hopefully someone listens, and someone, even if just one person can take it to heart. And I think you've done a good job here, and hopefully I've shared what needs to be shared.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for being here, whether you're here with us live or coming back to check it as an archive. So
yeah, no, I'd be more than willing to talk more about this or anything else. Cause
yes.
this is just one card. There's a whole pile of cards over there. So
Yep. We'll be back.
yeah.
You'll know that.
All right.
All right. Thanks so much, Jonathan. That was fun and meaningful and important. So I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Take care.
All right. Namaste to you.
Namaste.
All right.